The founder of Communist China was Mao Zedong, but the architect of the policies responsible for today's powerful China was his successor, Deng Xiaoping. Deng, a Chinese politician and one of the early revolutionaries, was a staunch communist. However, his relationship with Mao was tumultuous. Mao lost trust in him twice, leading to his removal from power and subsequent exile. Despite these setbacks, when Mao passed away, it was Deng who returned from political obscurity, outmaneuvered the extremists, and assumed leadership. Under his governance, China embarked on a new path, neither fully communist nor entirely a free market, which ultimately shaped the nation as we know it today. China's transformation is a remarkable story. 45 years ago, annual per capita income was less than $100. By 2021, it had risen to $12,500. Over those decades, millions of Chinese people were lifted out of poverty. The migration from villages to cities reshaped the nation, and China, once economically stagnant, now boasts a GDP per capita that rivals developed nations. The visionary behind this seismic change was Deng Xiaoping, often regarded as the true founding father of modern China. Historical background of Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping was born in the early 20th century, in the year that marked the end of China's 1,000-year monarchy. He hailed from Sichuan, a southwestern region with a history of relative independence compared to the coastal metropolises. Born into a moderately prosperous family, Deng had opportunities that many of his contemporaries did not. He became part of the first generation to attend modern schools in China, and at the age of 15 he travelled to France in 1920 to study. Europe was in the aftermath of World War I, and China had undergone its own revolution. While still a teenager, Deng's political views were shaped by his experiences abroad. In France, he encountered socialist ideas and observed the stark inequalities of industrial capitalism. Working menial jobs to support himself, Deng witnessed the harsh conditions of the working class, which reinforced his inclination towards communism. Alongside other young Chinese students, including future Prime Minister Zhou Enlai, Deng became part of the Communist Youth League in Europe. These experiences laid the foundation for his lifelong political convictions. Return to China and political rise. Deng Xiaoping returned to China as a fervent young communist, determined to fulfill his promise to his father of helping to build the nation. Looking back a century later, it's evident that he did just that, albeit through a process more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Deng's early political career saw him align with Mao Zedong and the core leadership of the Communist Party. Despite his background in urban-oriented Marxism, he adapted to Mao's vision, which emphasized rural peasants as the driving force behind China's communist revolution. Throughout his early years, Deng played a crucial role in the party's underground activities and its resistance against Japanese occupation during World War II. As a political commissar, he was deeply involved in military operations and strategy. Unlike Mao, who often worked from afar and engaged in theorizing, Deng was on the ground, managing practical matters and earning a reputation for pragmatism and efficiency. These experiences shaped his future leadership style, hands-on, results-oriented, and focused on implementation rather than ideology. Deng's involvement in the famous Long March, a grueling 6,000-kilometre retreat undertaken by the communist forces in the 1930s, further solidified his place among the party's elite. This period was one of immense hardship, and forged a sense of camaraderie among the party's core leadership. Deng's resilience during these tumultuous years set him apart as a capable and dedicated leader. Role under Mao and downfalls. After the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949, Deng became an integral part of Mao's government. He held significant positions, including Deputy Prime Minister, and was involved in major policy initiatives such as land reform and industrialization. However, many of Mao's campaigns, like the Great Leap Forward, ended not in the way that it was designed for. The Great Leap, aimed at rapidly industrializing China and boosting agricultural production, led to widespread famine and millions of deaths. Deng, along with other leaders, bore responsibility for these policies as part of the ruling establishment. When the Great Leap Forward failed, Mao blamed its failure not on his own decisions, but on supposed capitalist infiltrators and disloyal officials. Deng was among those purged during Mao's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, a campaign aimed at eliminating counter-revolutionary elements within the party and society. Sent to a tractor factory for forced labour and re-education, Deng experienced severe political setbacks, but he survived. Mao's later years were marked by erratic leadership and an increasing reliance on ideological extremism. However, by the mid-1970s, Mao began to recognise the need for more pragmatic governance. This realisation allowed Deng to return to political prominence as Deputy Prime Minister in 1974, just 2 years before Mao's death in 1976. Leadership after Mao's death. Mao's death marked the end of an era, but the question of China's future direction remained. Deng emerged as the dominant figure in the party, overcoming rivals such as the radical Gang of Four, who sought to continue Mao's hardline policies. By 1978, Deng had consolidated his power and set China on a new course focused on economic modernization rather than ideological purity. When Deng assumed leadership, China was in dire straits. The country's per capita GDP was a mere 160, far behind the United States and the Soviet Union at the time. Decades of central planning and ideological campaigns had left China impoverished and isolated. Deng recognized that radical change was necessary. One of Deng's earliest and most impactful reforms was in education. After the Cultural Revolution had effectively shut down universities for a decade, Deng reopened them in 1977, reintroducing entrance exams to ensure merit-based admissions. This move revitalized China's intellectual and technical workforce, laying the groundwork for modernization. Economic reforms and pragmatism. Deng's economic reforms fundamentally altered China's trajectory. Unlike Mao, who prioritized class struggle and revolutionary zeal, Deng shifted the party's focus to economic modernization. He famously declared, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice," encapsulating his pragmatic approach to governance. Deng introduced market-oriented reforms while maintaining the framework of a socialist state. He dismantled the centralized command economy, granting local governments greater autonomy in economic decision-making. This decentralization encouraged innovation and efficiency at the regional level, allowing local leaders to tailor policies to their specific needs. One of his boldest experiments was the creation of special economic zones, SEZs, in the early 1980s. These zones, such as Shenzhen, allowed for foreign investment, market-driven policies, and a degree of economic liberalization unheard of in Mao's China. These areas became laboratories for new ideas, and their success prompted the gradual implementation of similar policies nationwide. Foreign investment poured into China under Deng's leadership. Joint ventures between Chinese and foreign companies brought in not only capital, but also much-needed technology. This approach transformed industries like automobile manufacturing and electronics, setting the stage for China's emergence as a global economic powerhouse. Social and urban reforms. Deng's reforms extended beyond economics to social and urban policies. Under Mao, rural peasants were legally bound to their villages, unable to migrate to cities. Deng abolished these restrictions, allowing millions of rural Chinese to move to urban areas in search of better opportunities. This massive wave of urbanization transformed China's demographic and economic landscape. In agriculture, Deng introduced the household responsibility system, which allowed farmers to lease land from the government and retain profits from surplus production. This simple yet revolutionary change significantly boosted agricultural productivity and lifted millions out of poverty. Challenges and controversies. While Deng's policies spurred unprecedented economic growth, they also exposed deep societal and political tensions. In 1989, widespread student-led protests erupted in Tiananmen Square, demanding political reforms. The Tiananmen Square protests strained China's relations with the West, leading to sanctions and widespread condemnation. However, these repercussions were short-lived, and China continued its economic ascent under Deng's policies. Post-Tiananmen adjustments and legacy. Following the Tiananmen Square crackdown, Deng faced significant challenges in maintaining the momentum of China's reforms. The international community condemned the violence, and Western nations imposed symbolic sanctions on China. However, Deng remained steadfast in his vision for economic modernization, prioritizing economic growth over political liberalization. He believed that ensuring the Communist Party's control was essential to maintaining stability and achieving his long-term goals for China. Deng's response to the crisis included a calculated shift in leadership within the Communist Party. The General Secretary at the time, Zhao Ziyang, who had opposed the violent crackdown, was replaced by Jiang Zemin, a leader more aligned with Deng's pragmatic approach. This leadership transition underscored Deng's determination to keep the party unified and focused on his reform agenda while avoiding further unrest. Despite the political backlash, Deng's economic reforms continued to transform China. By the early 1990s, Deng launched his famous Southern Tour, visiting key economic hubs in southern China to reaffirm his commitment to opening up and reforming the economy. His speeches during this tour reinvigorated the reform movement, signaling to both domestic and international audiences that China's economic transformation would persist. Deng's economic philosophy. At the heart of Deng's reforms was his emphasis on pragmatism. He believed that the success of policies should be measured by their results rather than their adherence to ideological principles. This philosophy guided his approach to governance, allowing him to adopt market-oriented policies that were previously deemed incompatible with socialism. Deng rejected the rigid dogma of Mao's era, famously stating that it is glorious to get rich. This shift encouraged entrepreneurial activity and fostered a culture of innovation and hard work. Under his leadership, China's GDP grew at an average annual rate of over 8%, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty and transforming the country into a global economic powerhouse. Deng's policies also reshaped China's relationship with the world. His focus on trade and foreign investment opened China's economy to international markets. By the end of his leadership, China had become a major player in global trade, setting the stage for its eventual accession to the World Trade Organization in 2001. Political system under Deng. While Deng championed economic liberalization, he was equally committed to preserving the Communist Party's monopoly on political power. He maintained strict censorship on politically sensitive issues and resisted calls for democratic reforms. Deng viewed political dissent as a threat to the stability required for economic growth, leading to the continuation of authoritarian governance. Under Deng's leadership, the party implemented measures to prevent the concentration of power in a single leader, a response to the excesses of Mao's rule. Term limits were introduced for top leaders, and collective decision-making within the party was emphasized. These reforms were intended to create a more stable and predictable political environment, enabling the party to focus on long-term economic goals. Challenges of Deng's model. Deng's reforms brought immense economic growth, but they also created significant challenges. Income inequality widened as coastal regions and urban centres prospered, while rural areas lagged behind. Environmental degradation became a pressing issue as rapid industrialization took its toll on China's natural resources. Additionally, Deng's approach to governance, combining economic liberalization with political authoritarianism, created a unique model. Legacy of Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping's legacy is both complex and transformative. He is widely regarded as the architect of modern China, having laid the foundation for its rise as a global economic superpower. His pragmatic leadership and willingness to experiment with new ideas enabled China to achieve unprecedented levels of economic development. However, Deng's legacy is not without controversy. His role in the Tiananmen Square crackdown and his steadfast commitment to one-party rule have drawn criticism from political reformers. Despite these shortcomings, Deng's impact on China is undeniable. The reforms he initiated transformed China from a struggling agrarian society into a major industrial and technological power. His policies lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, reshaped global trade, and positioned China as a key player on the world stage. At the same time, his emphasis on stability and control ensured the Communist Party's dominance, shaping the trajectory of China's political system. Deng Xiaoping's approach to leadership was rooted in pragmatism and adaptability. Unlike Mao, who was a visionary theorist, Deng was a practical manager focused on achieving tangible results. This distinction marked a fundamental shift in the direction of China's development, moving from ideological rigidity to pragmatic reform. Deng's willingness to experiment with policies, learn from other countries, and embrace change set him apart as a unique leader.
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. It's one of the best ways to help more people see this content. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment below and join the conversation about today's topic. Your engagement and support mean everything to me and make it possible for me to create more impactful content that aims to bring the world closer together. If you'd like to take it a step further, you can support the channel directly through the link in the description. Every bit of support helps this community grow and fuels the mission to make a difference. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey.